All right, so here are with Charlie Kirk as he had a discussion with Dr. James Lindsay on the movie Beneath the Sheep Clothing, and then he feels that communists are not gone, but they have just been rebranded. And then I wanted to say to you that while you were growing, at what point did you realize that Santa Claus is not real? So without any further ado, let's get down to this video and check this out.
One of my favorite people in the world. Great American, great friend, smart, wise, tough, funny. Dr. James Lindsay is with us. Dr. Lindsay, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Charlie. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So lots to discuss this hour, but I want to make sure we plug the movie that you're involved in. I had somebody come up to me in Albuquerque and he said, Charlie, you got to check out this movie, Beneath Sheep's Clothing. It's unbelievable. This guy was just like on fire. I don't know if he works on the team or he saw a preview. I mean, he was like an evangelist for this film. Dr. Lindsay, tell us all about it.
Man, Charlie, I'll tell you, because like normally I'm a little modest to talk about stuff that I am involved in, but I've had a flood. The movie came out last Friday, and so it's been out just for the weekend, really. And I have had a flood of, messages sent to me that this thing is incredible. This film is going to save the Republic. Everybody has to see this. I've never seen a response like this. So it's really exciting. The point of the film, honestly, was to show what happened in Soviet Union in churches and in schools, and to say we're seeing similar stuff here in the United States now with woke. We're saying that communism's not coming, it's here, and that we have to wake up and deal with that. So we made a film because, books do a lot, shows do a lot, interviews do a lot. Social media does a lot, but a film really can reach people, and it's high action, it's extremely high production quality, it's really engaging. It's hard to stop watching it once you start. I've seen it a bunch of times, and every time I have to get through it because I can't put it down. And it's just, I think it's a really fantastic vehicle to tell America exactly what is now, frankly, on our ballot, which is communism's here.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So let's play the trailer here. And the film is Beneath Sheep's Clothing. People can find it at salemnow.com. And I tell you, James, this person that came up to me in Albuquerque, you'd think that he just saw The Godfather for the first time, right? I mean, he's like,
That's
Charlie, you got to check
man.
this out. And so I echo that. Let's play cut 74.
Here's the thing about communism. When it comes knocking at your door, it doesn't say, hi, I'm here to impoverish, enslave, and murder you. It says, I'm here to liberate you from oppression.
You take over the colleges of education, then you take over all the teachers, then you take over all the students, and thus you get the future.
He said the ultimate objective of having government school was to destroy Christianity. Those are his words.
People's war means to destroy the opposing country through unconventional methods.
And Khrushchev bragged about it. We'll take America without firing a shot.
In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of American students without being challenged. The result you can see.
So that's just a little taste. That was Yuri Bezmenov at the end of that clip there. So, James, I'm curious on a personal basis. Typically, your emphasis is Mao. I mean, you always pepper around the communist buffet of the 20th century, the horror show. Why the Soviet Union? What about the Soviet Union stuck out for you for the need to participate and help make this film?
Well, I wanted to help participate and make the film because I have a lot of ability to connect what's going on with communist regimes of the past to the woke regime of the present. But actually, this was Julie Beeling. That's the woman at the beginning of the trailer. It's her documentary. She's the director, and it's based off of a book she wrote by the same title. And so she actually has a master's degree, a double master's degree in Russian literature and Russian history, and she did her mission. She's Mormon. She did her mission in in Russia immediately after the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s. So she had all this firsthand experience picking up what was going on in the Soviet Union right after it collapsed. And in particular, what she was struck by was even though they had had 70 years of trying to hammer Christian belief out of the Russian people, virtually all of them, very, very few would say that they were atheists. They virtually all said that they retained their Christianity in private, that they still believed in God. And she wanted to kind of understand what had happened, particularly with the religious persecution of the Russians during Soviet Union. So her vision was to put together a film that showed that aspect of Soviet life and then compare it to what's going on in the US. And she asked me if I would be involved, if I would come and do, some talking head stuff. At first, it was a small role, and then we did a big, long interview one day, and it expanded. But just trying to connect those dots that she had, and she had started to connect to the woke movement and put a lot of depth and color to it, was why I wanted to be involved.
So, James, for the uninitiated in the audience that say, wait a second, hold on. Being woke and communism, those are two different things. I mean, woke is about opening your eyes to the lenses of impression. It's to see the police brutality and the colonialist implications. Communism is like killing fields. What is the connection for someone that is not in the weeds as much as they should between being woke, as Kamala Harris would say, you got to be woke, and communism? In fact, let me tee this up for you. Play cut 75.
And, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke. Yeah.
And there you have Lorene Powell Jobs horrified next to her that she's saying it. Connect the dots.
All right, so woke? That means woke up, right? It means awake. Well, what did you wake up to? Well, you woke up to that the world is made out of systems of oppression. In other words, it's an oppressor versus oppressed dynamic. Maybe it's economic, rich versus poor, or producers versus workers, but maybe it's race. Maybe it's white versus people of color. Maybe it's sex. Maybe it's, normal versus sexually deviant. Maybe it's male versus female. You could imagine a million different lines of oppressor versus oppressed, right? So that's woke. We all agree that that's woke. The identity politics is woke. Well, let's just go back to the very first page of the Communist Manifesto, which was written by Karl Marx in 1848. What did he say? He said that the entire movement of history is the conflict of classes, and he gives a lot of examples. Basically like slave owner versus slave and so on. And he says, or in a word, oppressor versus oppressed. So when you see this manipulation of waking up to believing society is organized around oppressor versus oppressed dynamics, and that the oppressed have to wake up and transform society to a new model that's going to be socialist or anti-racist or feminist, you are very likely dealing with something that is in the field of Marxism. And in this case, I've spent the past 5 years of my career nailing down that the origin point of virtually everything we see in the woke ideology comes straight out of communism, repackaged to attack the soft spots of the West.
We are so vulnerable to communism and to wokeism. The film says it's not coming, but it's here. And in some ways, this election, it properly framed, is a referendum on the American genre of communism. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, in fact, I've been a little bit glib, I suppose, but I go around and I've been thanking Vice President Harris for putting the national conversation about communism in our faces. The Harris-Walz ticket is a clearly Marxist ticket. Elon Musk said so controversially on Twitter the other day, and the way they shot back is almost a signature that it's communist. They said, oh, that's not right. Elon Musk doesn't understand communism. So, I mean, that's almost always how they tell you that's exactly what it is. So we can guess that in a few weeks it'll be, of course, it's communist, and here's why it's a good thing. Here's why maybe we do need a little more communism. And so I'm grateful that it's now coming to light, and I think we're about to have this national conversation about.
So let me ask you from a framing, just 30 seconds. If you were advising President Trump, would you say in a debate, you need to call her a communist? Do you think the American people are ready for that?
Yes, and he needs to be able to say why it is, with the oppressor versus oppressed line from the manifesto.
We're going to talk about this, and I don't say this as a hypothetical. I'm thinking of the short pieces of conversation I have with him here or there, what advice I would give, because it's totally true. My only concern, James, and you would know this better than I would traveling the country because you speak about communism, do some people just kind of repel when they hear you're just kind of a right-wing blowhard? I don't know. I think people are seeing things they've never seen before, but it doesn't really matter as much because it's true. She is a communist. That's right. Every time you hear her name, you should think Communist Harris. Communist Harris. Play cut 79.
Giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place.
So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests often everybody should get the same thing. Well, that often assumes everybody started out in the same place, as opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place. And if you then understand not everybody started out in the same place, you understand some people need more. So we all end up in the same place.
James Lindsay, what is going on here?
We are watching Kamala Harris, Communist Harris, repeat a doctrine from the early 1920s of Soviet Union. I told you recently when we were together at the Believers Summit that I've been reading Lenin and Stalin for the kind of in depth for the first time, and it's sort of because of this this film that I kind of got involved in wanting to look into that. And it turns out that one of the second most important program, according to Stalin in 1923, the Soviet Union was to undergo, was what we would call DEI. I can't say anything in Russian, so I hope this comes through. I'm going to let my phone pronounce it in Russian to you, but...
Разнообразие, фактическое равенство, коренизация.
So I don't know if that came
makes
through or not.
That makes perfect sense
but
to me.
Yeah, diversity, actual equality, and indigenization. You can actually type those into Google Translate and see the impossible to pronounce words yourself. Diversity is literally just the importation of the Soviet project. Actual equality is what they called equity instead of calling it equity, and it means exactly what Kamala Harris just said. It meant not just economic equity, but also cultural equity. And then indigenization meant using the various different nationalities and ethnic groups of China of Soviet Union, and bringing them in and showing them that their real expression of citizenship would be through socialism. And so it is, if you actually read about what Stalin and Lenin wanted in the early 1920s for that project, which they said was the second most important project for the Soviet Union to undertake, it's exactly the diversity, equity, and inclusion project that we have happening today. So what you're just hearing Kamala Harris repackaging in, modern English, what was a Soviet project considered of highest or second highest priority 100 years ago.
So the idea of the goal of communism, they first must eliminate the family, church, and or religious life and private property. Let's go one by one. Which one? Let's start with the family. How does wokeism or communism aim to eliminate or deteriorate the family?
Well, let me clarify real quick first that the reason that they go after family, religion, and property so eagerly is because what they're actually after is your soul, which they seek to transform into being communist. And those are the things that protect it. So your family grounds you in who you are. And so they have to split you away like any other cult would do, split you away from your family so that you don't have your indigenous, if you will, to your family identity anymore. And they do that by feeding you doctrines that you are part of the new vanguard of history, frankly. You're moving history forward, and your parents are polluted with old values. This was the Smash the Four Olds campaign in China's Cultural Revolution, for example. They did the same thing in Soviet Union. And what we have today is that you get your kids hopped up, especially on new visions of racial equality, not like the bad old racist days, and get them hopped up on new visions of gender and sexual identities that their parents won't understand. And then you drive wedges. And like we talked about with the law in Minnesota, California, Washington, and lots of these other hard Democrat states, what we're actually seeing is that they're taking that now and flipping it around so that the state can intervene and actually remove the child from parental care if they don't affirm what they're being taught at school and being told their parents probably won't like, to drive even a deeper wedge. And a very low level, though, even Common Core math, which nobody in the world understands at all, made it so that parents couldn't do their homework with their kids. So that bonding of, mom or dad helping you with your math homework, because it's hard to learn math, that's gone. That's absolutely gone because the parents aren't allowed to use their methods.
That's right. Yeah, the whole idea of Common Core is that there's a new math that your parents can't be involved in, so you must go to the state to understand the new math. So the church, you've done a lot of commentary on the church, James. I think you touch on this a little bit in the film, is that right? And
yeah, a lot.
Yeah, a lot. Good. So state of the American church is that you said this at our Believer Summit, they've been subverted. I know you mentioned this previously. What is the best way then to excommunicate woke communism from the church and from religion?
You're right. And what the experiments of the Soviet Union and China taught communists is that, especially even stronger in the Christian West, it doesn't work to try to smash people's religion out of them. The Soviet experiments couldn't do it. Even with the most brutal force, like in the Pestesti prison in Romania, they couldn't force people out of their faith. It just doesn't work. And so instead, you have to subvert their beliefs. You have to set up a false church that teaches communist doctrine as though it's Christianity. And that means you have a subverted faith. It's teaching the faith the wrong way. We've seen a million examples of clips. I think there's one going viral again today of some lady doing this. And the fact of the matter is, or maybe it's a guy posing as a lady, I can't tell. Who knows these days? So what you have to do is you have to be discerning. You have to get very square in your theology, be very discerning, and it's up to pastors who are leading their churches to get very clear on what is required to be biblically grounded in their faith and biblically accurate in their faith. And then it's their responsibility to teach and shepherd their flocks exactly that way, and not to just, kind of have this anything goes Christianity where everything's about kind of a soft affirmation and everybody's, good doing you do you, whatever they want to do.
This whole idea of like, who am I to judge, live and let live. So the current game in front of us is the question of how do you defeat communists in a domestic political sense? You have rules that you've developed for this, James. What are they, and what are the best ways to defeat an overwhelmingly powerful communist political operation?
Well, I mean, the first rule is really simple, and it's actually biblical, which is, like I just said, you've got to get discerning. You've got to be able to start to pull apart this manipulated language so that you understand when they use words like democracy or inclusion, that they don't mean what you think. When they use words like transform or transformative, that your red flag goes up, so that you can start to clarify or demystify yourself from their misuses of language that they use to reorganize society without people realizing it. That's the first rule, is you have to become informed. And then after you get informed, you have to get involved. You have to get off of the couch. You have to figure out what your talents are, and you have to get started. But when Jesus in Matthew chapter 10 sends his disciples out, he doesn't send them out just to be discerning. He says that you also have to be gentle. We're up against a very scary beast of a machine. And we can see, for example, very clearly in the UK, which has flipped extraordinarily quickly into totalitarianism, that if you go out without remembering what gentleness looks like in your organizing and in your activities, that it's just going to be used as a pretext to stamp on you and take more power, which of course accelerates this dynamic of society spinning off the rails. Don't think for a second they don't want that to be here. So we've got to be clear, we've got to be active, and we've got to be smart and in fact gentle in how we go forward. Firm but gentle. We can't be pushed over, obviously. We can't tolerate the intolerable.
What is the significance, and I got this from you, it's so simple, of showing, not telling when you're fighting a communist?
Oh, yeah, that's so important. If I can sit here and tell you, and maybe many of your listeners are actually going through this right now. I've told you things, right? But if I don't show you, that's why I wanted to play the stupid Russian words through my phone that I can't pronounce. Because if I show you, like, look, here's where Stalin said, this is the second most important aspect of the party. Or if I tell you, Herbert Marcuse in the 1960s wrote that we're going to have a repressive tolerance or a liberating tolerance regime, which means that we're going to support the left wing and we're going to crush the right wing. You might not believe me, but if I show you that document and show it, like, there it is right there in print, and here's the significance of this person. Or if I show you the document called Politics of Education, which is a book by Paulo Freire, where he says that becoming woke means going through a literal rebirth and a personal Easter, he calls it. And then he has a whole paragraph saying, in fact, the Easter of commemorative rhetoric. In other words, the Christian Easter is dead, he says, with no hope of resurrection. You have to die and be reborn to walk with the oppressed. And then in the forward, it says literally that the point of this is to build the kingdom of God here on earth in solidarity with the oppressed. When I show you that's what the actual document says and tell you the significance of that, it changes everything. When you see the drag queen in front of children rather than hearing that maybe it happened, you see the horror on the child's face. Then you can actually understand what's going on. The quote from the queer theorist that says that the goal is to lead children into an emotional crisis and structure that environment around them to resolve it productively. His name's Kevin Kumashiro. The paper's called Against Repetition. You can go see it with your own eyes for yourself. When you see it, it's actually believable. But until you see it, you think nobody could possibly say or believe that.
You must be unburdened by what has been. What is it, James? How do you say it?
We must be able to see what can be, unburdened by what has been.
I got to get that. I got to get that memorized. This clip together we had at the Believer Summit has been seen well over 10 million times, James. I don't know if you know that. It's really going viral. I'm sure people are messaging you about it. It's really great. Play cut 76.
Vice President Harris will say repeatedly, what is the quote? The quote is that we can see what can be unburdened by what has been.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know?
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Is that word salad or Marxism? It's Marxism. That is, in fact, not at all word salad. It's a Marxist incantation, as a matter of fact. It's like a spell. So you can see the possibility of a world that's unburdened from its own history, which is exactly what Mao Zedong did when he launched the campaign of Smash the Four Olds, the four old characteristics of Chinese society. They were going to make a new China that was going to be unburdened by what had been in the past of China. This is what the Soviets, the Bolsheviks, did when they took over power in Russia, is that they were going to make the new Russia. They're going to make the new man, as a matter of fact. People could become unburdened by what has been so that they could see what could possibly be in the terms of a socialist utopia. So when she says that, I assume, given that her father was a Marxist, I assume she knows what she's saying, and I don't buy her idiot valley speak shtick one bit. I think she's far more smart and far more savvy than conservatives have given her credit for, and she is an outright Marxist. It is very, very clear in her language, and that's what the Democrats want to nominate for president right now, which is kind of horrifying.
James, do you think you fell out of a coconut tree?
No, but I think that's a Marxist sentiment too, right? It's because the whole idea of Marxism is, as Marx actually said himself in his 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, he said that, men make their own historical conditions, but they don't make them as they please. They make them according to the historical conditions that are present in the system that they're in. And so he says that the weight of all of the past generations lives or haunts or weighs on, I think as it is, weighs on the brains of the living like a nightmare. And so falling out of you didn't fall out of a coconut tree means you didn't come from, nowhere in the time that you're in. You came into a world that was built off of an entire historical tradition, an entire transformation of history. So you have to pick up where you are and go forward. Everything the woman says almost is Marxist.
Yeah, that famous coconut tree, she's cackling into the mic, says, what do you think, you fell out of a coconut tree? People exist in the context. Therefore, James, you're not a sovereign individual with your own agency and choices and action, that it's about deconstructing colonialism or getting rid of racism or white supremacy. Can you connect those dots, James? It's very, very important.
Yeah, you are in this historical context that you find yourself in, what Marx called your historical conditions. Those historical conditions are the product of the society, and they tend to brainwash people to reproduce them. But it's possible to wake up and to avoid your social production, as it's called. It's called the theory of social production or theory of social reproduction. You can avoid being dragged through reproducing history generation after generation by awakening to the fact that there's an oppressor-oppressed dynamic and you are part of that oppressed. So you have an insight into how society is actually not for everybody. It's not fair. It's not socialist. It denies our social nature or our anti-racist nature or our queer nature. And you can actually get to work. The phrase is do the work, which is the same work that the hammer and sickle were supposed to do in Soviet Russia or in China. And you can do the work to transform society into a new way of being that will be, some socialist utopia.
Minute remaining. James, remind the audience how to find the film and the call to action, please.
Yeah, the film is called Beneath Sheep's Clothing. The website for it is beneathsheepsclothing.movie, all written as one big word. It's on Watch Salem now presently as well, so you can go get the films there. I encourage everybody to go see this. I encourage you to not just watch it, but share it on social media, share it with a friend, but also see if you can put together, get some of your left-leaning or Democrat friends to watch this, because this isn't a question of left versus right. This isn't a question of Republican versus Democrat. This is America versus communism. And we need to wake up as many people as we possibly can. We're hearing from a lot of Democrats and leftists traditionally right now who are saying, wait a minute, communism's not good. Well, they need to have the dots connected. So show them the film.
James Lindsay, thank you so much. SalemNow.com. That was a great discussion. Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Charlie.
Email us freedom@charliekirk.com. To repeat, if Kamala Harris, the current vice president, becomes president, it will be the most advanced communism has ever come in the history of our country. Communism's not coming. Communism is here. She is a communist, and communism is on the ballot.
That's a very interesting one. But then you bear with me that there is something I say. I asked, you understand, in the beginning of the video that at what point did you grow and then you realize that Santa Claus is not real? And then that's why you see Vice President says that we should be able to see what can be and unbothered by what has been. Why do you think, you understand, she says so? When she says that, do you think that everything comes from a coconut tree? It means that everything, you understand, comes from something. Atheist could says that, paraphrase, you understand, the scientist, and says that the world is being created from Big Bang, from explosion. But then, what actually causes the explosion? What happened, you understand, in the beginning? You see, when you look at this beneath the sheep clothing, you realize that communist is something that is actually in operation almost in everywhere, even in the place of worship. But then we do not know. Have you asked yourself and says that if there is no day of accountability, would you have stopped committing adultery? That's for those who are married. Would you have stopped doing fornication? Would you have stopped drinking? Would you have stopped committing murder? Maybe, probably. People don't do all those things, not because they don't want to do them, but because they are thinking about the day of accountability and what will happen to them. Maybe that makes them, you understand, to behave the way they behave, and not basically because they don't want to do them. Now, when you look at, you understand, Marxism, for instance, or should I say communist, you could see that communists are actually in operation in the places of worship. Have you asked yourself, you understand, this very question that we could go to some churches and then they rebranded and then they say that you can just come the way you are, wear whatever you want to wear. If you're a woman, if you like, open your hair, enter the churches. Whatever, you understand, you want to do, just do that. God look at the soul. Is it really like that? You see, that is why you really need what? The spirit of discernment to be able to know what is right or wrong. If otherwise, we will get to realize at the judgment day that whatever we thought that they don't matter, those are the things that really matters. And then you got to realize that we are destroyed. So for me, I would say that, you understand, community is something that is everywhere. And then it's a process of kind of creating fear to the people. And then so that they can be able to control them. It's just like, you know, communists are just rebranded, right, to be able to control people. That's exactly where we are today. We are just, you understand, in the world, you understand. And then we think that, you understand, we know what we are doing. But then, until at some point, you got to realize that we are actually being controlled, you understand, by something. And that's why you see, I ask us that, at what point did you get to realize that Santa Claus is not even real? Because of what? We tend to do things based on how, you understand, we are being told. And then at that point in time, we got, you understand, controlled, you understand, in the process. And if you look at this, you understand, as a Christian, you understand, for instance, we could say that we were sinners, right? And then when we accept Jesus Christ as our Lord and personal Savior, right, then we experience this new birth. So we are now a new creation, right? So if you look at, you understand, this Marxist, you understand, code, when it says that we should be able to see what can be and unbothered by what has been? Should we be worried about the sin we have committed in the past? Should we focus on the future? And is communism right, or is it wrong? It's just up to you, and is subject to your own interpretation. Of course, everybody should try and watch this movie, Beneath the Sheep Clothing. It's gonna help you, but then it's all subject to your own interpretation. So I want to see your thought and opinion at the comment section, and may God bless you as you do so. So this is the end of my video. If you like my reaction, you should like, share and subscribe. And if you have any video you want me to react to, don't forget to drop it at the comment section, and I'm going to check it out. So you remain blessed, and I see you in my next video. Goodbye.